All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. So pumped today to have James Hou on our show today because James, he got introduced to me through a good friend, a wholesaler of mine that realized that my niche, as you know, is physician groups. And James also has a niche. And James is in the P&C insurance world. He's also an attorney. His background has been really impressive. Right now, he's with Moody Insurance Company. But I want James to give us a quick introduction. Tell us, James, how you got here, where the story, like in a quick summary. Who is James, and why do you do what you do?
Sure. Okay. So yeah, property casualty insurance broker, mostly commercial. I am with Moody Insurance out of Denver, offices in Colorado Springs and Grand Junction as well. Um, the way that I got here was I enlisted in the Army at 19. Thought I was going to make a career of it. 10 years later, one trip overseas, decided, I'm going to go ahead and take a break. Already had my bachelor's, so I had the GI Bill.
Mm.
So I went to law school really more because I had the GI Bill burning a hole in my pocket, not because I wanted to be, insert your TV law show lawyer here. Um, and then halfway through, well, so second year out of those 3 years, kind of got drawn into insurance by a friend in New Orleans. So I went to law school at Tulane in New Orleans. Had a friend kind of talk to me about it. I probably had the same impression of insurance as most people do, right? Like the 15 minutes or less saves you 15% or more,
Yeah.
auto type,
Yeah.
um,
Insurance is such a monster. There's so many avenues and different things you can
yeah,
do in insurance that I don't
yeah,
think anyone really. I don't know. I mean, maybe if you have a family member or father, somebody has insurance background, you go that route.
right,
But I don't think anyone goes to college saying, "I'm going to go into insurance." So that
right,
is
exactly.
that is an
Yeah,
interesting path you took. You know.
yeah, oh, for sure. And well, like a small detour is, I don't know if I told you this, I have a friend who was also in the Army with me, went to college together. He actually ended up being a forest ranger, and then he now does like endangered species law enforcement. So when my
Really?
kids go to when my kids go to his office, he's like, "You guys want to see a bald eagle? I've got one in the freezer," right? Because that's what he does. And they go
Yeah.
to my office, and I'm like, "That printer over there prints 100 pages a minute, and it's staples." And they're like, "Yeah, but I just want to see the bald eagle," right? So that's what most people think of insurance is kind of what I do. I think
So
I do it a little bit.
did you get your bachelor's and then go in the army and then go get your
Yes,
JD?
yes. So bachelor's first, and then the Army, and then law school, planning on actually going back into federal service in some way, but again, kind of took that detour into PNC coverage. Um, yeah, actually, so not a licensed practicing attorney. Finished my law degree. Do have the scroll is actually off screen, um, but not an attorney, and that's kind of it worked out to my favor because we talked about this before the recording is attorneys know a lot for their area, but insurance wise, for the most part, most attorneys just say attorney, insurance is a check the box. Yes, you have it. No, you don't.
Right.
And then if and when something happens and the insurance doesn't respond the way that people expect, there's like a whole other group of attorneys that work on these claims issues. But your typical attorney on the street, for the most part, doesn't know a whole lot about insurance because ideally they shouldn't have to get involved, right? Like most cases, most claims do get resolved without having to have, the policyholder retain an attorney to handle something. So,
Right. It's all about risk, right? So
right,
I think that's where I think most of us they get into this business world where whatever our avenue, as an advisor, there's a certain element that we try to insure against risk as a fiduciary advisor, those kind of things,
right,
and there's lots of things that go into that. But then we also usually have an attorney that helps review our agreements. So
right,
I think you having both backgrounds, I think that's really fascinating because
right,
that's not common. And I think that's probably been
right,
valuable to your customers and your clients.
right. And yeah, I mean, when you're sitting there and the attorney says, "Oh, you have insurance for that, right?" Your answer is yes, and he takes your answer as yes, and everybody just moves on.
Right. I don't know
And
what
then
other
you
questions.
find out, yeah, like when something happens, yes, you do have a policy, but that policy doesn't cover this, or that policy covers this only if, right? So yeah, that's kind of where I've kind of cut out my niche, right? So
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And that's what kind of drew me to you. And I mean, you're very great on LinkedIn. So everybody that's listening to this, you need to go follow James on LinkedIn because he puts out tons of good content and is
Actually, yeah,
very good at interacting with his audience, which I think is a really valuable piece. But what I found out about James was that you figured out your niche, and that's what's unique that I have not found in your area. As far as, and most advisors, you should know a P&C person, you should know a benefits person, a broker,
right,
but P&C is always like, yeah, I can help insure anything, right? They're always like, whatever business, whatever risk there is, we're going to insure it and we can find a product for that, which to me, it feels a little strange because how do they really know what they're insuring? Do they really understand the risks involved? Or are they just trying to get a policy sold that kind of blanket covers it? But when it gets down to an actual
right,
claim, is it gonna work? So tell me about that
right.
process, how you ended up in this physician niche, and why and how that works for you.
Yeah, so I started out very much a generalist. I think most of us are generalists. Oddly enough, my first insurance job out of college was with a very large hospital system. So I kind of came into it backwards to where we started very large. And then now actually I focus on small and medium-sized private practices, completely the opposite of a 45,000 employee system. Um, but kind of part of that transition was I realized that there's a lot of, right, so my job is, I tell people that like when you wake up, you walk around with like a bundle of responsibilities, and with responsibility comes like liabilities and everything else. Um, Most of the time you don't think about it until one day you get served a letter in the mail that says, hey, that employee you fired 6 months ago has filed a claim, or hey, that patient that was here 2 weeks ago, he slipped and fell. I actually had a case last year where a patient went to the doctor's office, left, and on his way out, backing up his car, like the front bumper scraped, whatever that's called, right? Like the stopper at the end of the
Yeah,
parking
in the
spot.
parking lot, yeah.
Yeah, and he sued the doctor's office, and the doctor was like, like,
Wow.
like, was anything I did wrong, right? Like, if you came in for like a shoulder X-ray, was that wrong? And he's like, no, but my car got damaged because of your office parking lot. Um, right. So like that doctor, when he woke up that morning, did not expect that one of his bundle of problems was a patient who scrapes his car on the way out the door, or already out the door on the way out of the parking lot. So that's generally, like, that's true for anyone, right? Like you walk out the door today, you back into something, you go to the grocery store, you spill something, that's true. With physicians, they've got the physician patient interaction. They're also running their own small to medium-sized businesses with their own employees. They've got vendors, they've got other service providers. There's also the state professional review board. They've also got to maintain their specialty board certifications. There's also, if they're collecting Medicare, Medicaid, there's also the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services at the federal level that's reviewing them. There's state Medicaid that's also reviewing them. There's Blue Cross Blue Shield, there's Cigna, there's Anthem. So these doctors, their minds are, I'm a doctor, I have patients, and I have employees. And they know that they work with CMS and HHS and all this other stuff, but it's almost separate in their minds that a CMS billing, filing, compliance problem is not the same as a medical malpractice. And that just ends up being kind of divided in their minds. So what I ended up finding out was you kind of got, they almost need somebody else to manage all of this because they're dealing with more oversight boards. I mean, you're in a very regulated industry, but I don't think you're regulated the way that doctors are
No,
still.
there's a lot more for them for sure. Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
you got
So
the
I think that's kind
facilities.
of where so that's kind of where I stumbled into, there's no way, right? Like when a doctor gets a notice from CMS that they did something wrong, they know that, yes, this is my responsibility as the physician owner to manage this. But there's no way that they're managing every single line of code or regulation that they get from CMS, in addition to all of these other agencies that are, rightfully so. As like a patient, I want my doctor to be under a lot of oversight. but that doctor's still one person and he can't manage everything all the time. And that opens up kind of that pool of risks that are out there that people don't think about until they get that letter. So
Right. Yeah, it doesn't become a problem until it is a problem, and then it's too
yeah,
late.
and they don't even realize that that's a potential, right? Like, I mean, the parking lot thing, like
Yeah, that's insane.
no
And
doctor wakes up today and is like, I wonder if somebody's going to hurt their car in my parking lot today, and I need to plan for that. But it happens, right? So
so how did you end up deciding to go down the physician niche? You just kind of picked up that first hospital system, and that was where you had
yeah,
that
so I
notion that
actually
this is
was,
big?
yeah, so right, I was in Houston. So Houston has a lot of, right, like Houston, Dallas are kind of core medical communities. So just through referrals, I would get told, hey, here's this doctor's office. They had a claim last year that wasn't handled correctly. They're really upset, right? Whether it's bankers, accountants, attorneys are usually kind of my referral sources. And they would say like, I don't think this is what you do, but this is an insurance problem, I think. Do you mind having a conversation with, Jake or John or Susan or whoever? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Like if I can help, I'm happy to help. And that's when I realized that the level of knowledge, and again, like I think that's the other part of why this niche is, I want my neurosurgeon to understand neurosurgery, right? Like he should not be learning the finer points of PNC insurance or his company 401k plan. Like
Yeah,
if I'm going under the knife, I want my neurosurgeon to just like every waking moment neurosurgery. So
yeah, it's
yeah,
really
that's
a
kind of
team.
how I got
Yeah, because
referred, and I figured, yeah.
yeah, you have to have the team surround you. Any business owner, I think, has the same scenario, right?
Mhm.
They need to focus their attention on what their craft is. For physicians, that's really
Right,
important because it is life and death, literally. So
right,
we'd rather have them focus on that than what is my 401k doing? What are the risks I have there? Parking lots. I mean, there's so many
right,
nuances to being a business owner, and even more so for someone that's a specialist like a physician. So
right. And
having
you hear a lot about like, as a business owner, you need to work on your business, not in the business, which I think is generally good advice. But if your business happens to be running your medical practice, like you better be working in that, right? Like you can't just say, well, I'm a dermatologist and I have a sign out there that says I'm a dermatologist and I see patients, but today I'm working on my business, not in my business, right? Like I don't want my dermatologist to work on his business. I want him to work on dermatology or whatever. So I
yeah,
think doctors are almost forced into not being able to follow what's generally good advice, right? Of like, take that higher level view, don't get involved in the weeds. But when patients go and see you, like you're the weed they want you to look at today. They don't want you to be like, oh, well, I don't get into weeds of patient care. I'm managing 401ks and my retirement plan today, right? So,
right, right. So
yeah.
which let's tie that back into the 401k space, because most of the listeners are going to be the advisors or wholesalers selling products, and I think it's unique to help them wrap their head around the team approach from a 401k advisor component, because a lot of times I think the pivot person that kind of starts the benefits discussion is the benefits broker, and then the
Mhm.
401k person gets pulled into that discussion sometimes. A lot of times it's separate. I'm going to do some more content about that because I think it needs to be more connected.
Right.
But you're that third part of that, the triangle, in my opinion, the triangle of really important things that have to be in place outside of your attorney and CPA that kind of just are always there.
Right.
You've got your benefits broker, your 401k advisor, and your PNC. I mean, covering all these different areas of your business. And so advisors, you need to have someone that understands your niche that does this niche. So it's kind of, um,
Right.
I don't know much about PNC insurance. I know enough to navigate, a little bit of it, but it's definitely someone I want to rely on someone like you to be a benefit. And that's where you can actually bring value to your client. You're not just introducing someone blindly. You have spent time outside of your business doing due diligence on someone that can help your clients, and that's really valuable. So,
Right.
but how do we make those connections better? Like, how if 4K advisors
I,
just so much in their world, how do they find the right PNC person? What questions should they ask? Like, how do you get these these contacts made, do you think, from your side of the business?
It is very difficult. I think, there's certainly PNC brokers that are much, much more successful than I am. I think I'm definitely kind of a little weirdo out there doing my own thing. And so in the PNC for medical practices world, there are certainly established incumbents that have 80, 70% of the market. When you have that kind of market share, you can take kind of a breather. Again, I get a lot of referrals from bankers and attorneys, and they'll say like, oh, I know exactly who the PNC broker is for my client. They've used the same broker for the last 15 years, and yet this thing came through. But because they're the incumbent and they've got such large market share, even a very dissatisfied physician office will continue to renew with that same incumbent. Not to say that the big guys are necessarily bad, but I think as 401k advisors, definitely you need to have that conversation about where that individual broker, right? Because we all work under larger organizations, and within the organization's rules, you can kind of find some way to personalize how you do that job.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is a one-on-one. You have to kind of feel out where that person sees it. One major way to kind of tell is, I think you and I have talked about the agent and broker differences. So like an agent, so I used to work for State Farm. So like legitimately State Farm training, and this is nothing derogatory against State Farm. Everybody's kind of like this.
Everybody thinks I work there because my name's Jake.
I
It's
didn't even make that
joke
connection.
every meeting, like, no, I'm
yes,
not.
of course. Yeah. No, absolutely. I get it. Yeah. No, I didn't even make that connection until just now. But yeah, so they tell you like you're a State Farm agent or you work for an agent, which means you represent State Farm, not James or Jake or Susan who buys the auto policy from you. And I always
products. Is that what you mean? Like proprietary State Farm products?
Yes, right. So your auto insurance, whether it's State Farm, Allstate, Geico, Progressive.
Is that the term?
Yes, you're captive. Yes. So most agents are captive. And that's true for the insurance, the medical insurance world also, which means if and when, right, let's say it's medical malpractice or us, if you as a physician buy it from me as an agent of medical malpractice or us, anything that goes wrong with that claim, I'm an employee of the insurance company. I'm not there as necessarily your advocate.
Right.
Right. So your captive agents, they're there as an employee of the insurance company, not your advocate. Your brokers are there to kind of be that middleman, and certainly middleman has bad connotations to it, but PNC is complicated enough that I feel like I'm justified in being a middleman in there. I'm there as an advocate for the buyer. You and I had talked in a previous session about, right, of all these policies that are out there, the fine print starts making a difference, right? When you have a claim, you kind of read through that policy and figure out how that would play out. Mm-hmm. The agent's job is not really to kind of nitpick what's wrong with their product or like the fine print that maybe doesn't look so great or sound so great when they present it to you. The broker's job is to say, hey, look, there's 4 different options out there. In the event that you get a medical malpractice claim, this company does this company requires this of you. Neither of these are perfect, but here's the 2. You make the decision now that you've actually, right, like I've looked at the full text of, on this policy, it's addressed on page 4. On this policy, it's addressed on page 37. I've brought this decision for you to make. How do you pick the best of, honestly, usually imperfect options, because right, there's nothing's perfect out there, and at least you're aware, and then you make that decision so you kind of know how things play out. The agent's job is not to say, hey, I'm offering an imperfect product. Their job is to say, oh yeah, you want $1 million of coverage. Look, page 1, $1 million of coverage. And look, our premium is so low. Go ahead and sign and we'll get this going.
Yeah, it's been on their side. So similar to our world, before more fee based or fee only advisors started to show up, you got paid in 401ks from the fund companies. And so there was a real
Yes.
conflict of interest because you could recommend a fund that paid you more than another one, and the client or
Right.
the participant would have no clue. And on the wholesaler side, we still see this where they're representing their product. And so I think the more successful wholesalers that are really trying to help advisors and clients are the ones that they'll be very transparent and honest, saying our product honestly doesn't fit that client. Like,
Right.
it's not a great fit. If a wholesaler tells me that, I know that they're legit and they actually are good at
Right.
their job. And if they don't, and I kind of can tell, it's sad because they're just trying to push their product. So it's the same
Right.
thing in the benefits in the P&C world. Is you want
Yes.
someone that's going to be on the client side, not the product side. And that's really
Right.
probably the first step of how to find a good partner. Make sure they're an independent person, not captive to a big firm like that.
Yeah, that again, yeah, I do say that there's no clear-cut answers. So there are very good agents out there who recognize that they offer an imperfect product, and the best way to the best way to serve the client is to let the client know that, hey, this is imperfect, but it's the best you've got.
Yeah.
I think the second way of kind of checking to see if you've got a good person on the other side of the table with you is, are they asking to see the full policy? Because right? Like, I don't know if you've ever had like a car accident or like a hail damage or wildfire damage to your home. When you
I've had
file that
zero
claim,
claims. I have never had a claim on my
do
home
not,
or my car.
you need to stop talking. You're going to bring that on yourself. Everybody has claims at some point.
I'm
You
sure I
just have
will.
done,
I
yeah,
paid
like,
tons of money just so that I could have that coverage, but
yeah, you're like on like the fourth trigger pull of Russian roulette. If you, yeah, do not tempt fate. Um, when something happens and you call the insurance company, the adjuster is going to say, hey, I'm going to come out and take some pictures. We'll get back to you. And they'll come back and they'll say, hey, look, on page 37, this doesn't look, you read it for yourself. This isn't covered, right? Like, that's just how claims play out.
yeah.
You want to have somebody who's read all those pages beforehand, because, right, when your house is on fire or your roof's been damaged by hail or whatever, that's too late to find out that hail is not covered.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
remember
just,
the day
yeah.
after the earthquake happened in Utah,
Oh, yeah.
I called because I had extra earthquake insurance and it lapsed. I didn't pay for it. I don't know. I just
Right.
forgot. And then the next morning, I called my buddy who I bought the policy from, and he's like, I can't even get it for you now. Like, cause there was like
Right.
aftershocks. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And
Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
you can't do it after the fact. And I think that's important to know, to have somebody on your side to say, hey, did you think about this risk? But which leads into like, I guess some of my thoughts around how insurance agents get paid. It's still the classic way we used to get paid in our industry. Now it's shifted to this fee thing. Do you think it'll ever get to that point where you'll get paid somehow, like on a consistent basis, that really isn't impacted by which product they buy? Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
So I would love for that to be the model. I mean, again, like on the financial planning side, this is like a decades long fight that continues to be fought.
Yes.
I don't think the PNC world is even fighting that fight right now, but definitely I think clients are asking for it to an extent, to the extent that they even think about that, that's a number to be discussed.
Yeah.
I think
That would
on
be
the
interesting.
broker side,
Like a retainer model, right? Like,
yeah, no,
you pay
absolutely. Yeah,
this
I would,
agent
yeah,
like a dollar amount or a percentage or something all year long to monitor their side of the industry, what policies and what kind of coverages you can get versus what that
right.
risk that client has. Like
Yes.
that's like light bulb moment. Like, I think that would be incredible.
I would love, so yeah, but for a lot of reasons, right? Like, again, we're talking about like the broker agent model. The insurance companies aren't the bad guy to me either, because certainly like there have been times where I've called and said, hey, look, there's a gray area here, but it's still very much within your discretion to approve this claim, to change this term of the policy. Can you please do that? And more times than not, the insurance company does, everybody's got to complain about their insurance didn't do this or didn't do that. For the most part, on my side, dealing with insurance companies every day, more times than not, they break in favor of the policyholder. So they're not the bad guys, but they definitely get paid on premium collected. So I think if we were to talk about why doesn't company A pay a James or a Susan as a PNC consultant for $1,000 a year and just take that out of the commission portion of the premium? I think the insurance companies from their, right, like a lot of these are publicly owned companies. So now you're talking about a revenue loss of 10%, 15%, 20%, whatever.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of
There's a lot
that
of drivers
number.
behind all that. That
Yeah, that number
not on the
between you and me
table
makes
for it.
sense, but
Yeah.
it's going to reflect so many other reports and filings that who knows when that will change. But I'm definitely on your side there. Having
Yeah.
said that,
I've never thought about it before, but it makes sense to me that that model could possibly something, way down the road we see,
yeah,
because as a business owner myself, like I would find that valuable rather than buying a
yeah.
product.
Well, and it makes, so I don't know, have I used the nurse retirement party example with you before?
Mm-mm.
So in a medical office, right? Let's say even if it's a small practice of 3 physicians and 10 nurses and 2 medical assistants, that's a small family, right? It's a small business. It's run like a small family. So, if Susan is going to school or Susan graduated, like nurse Susan graduated, she's been working nights to study and then she's graduated, we're going to throw her a party at the office, right? Or she's retiring or somebody's son, just whatever. We're going to throw them a party at the office. We're going to put up signs in the break room. Hey, don't forget Thursday at noon, Friday at noon, party for Susan. At 11 o'clock, Nurse James will run off to the local grocery store and I will buy supplies for the party in an hour. Perfectly normal. This happens all the time. But if I get in an accident in the parking lot of the grocery store and I get out and say, oh, hey, Jake, I don't know your name. Right? Oh, hey, mister, I'm sorry I hit your car. Here's my information. Let me, I'll take care of this. And you see that, right, Houston Orthopedics, I'm in scrubs and this is Houston Orthopedics. By the time you leave the parking lot, there's a billboard out there that says, did you get hurt in a car accident? Call 1-800 so-and-so, right?
Yeah.
Nurse James does not speak for Houston Orthopedics, but your attorney is going to say, oh, really? Right? Like, so he was in scrubs. I'm going to go ahead and I will take this case and I will get you personal injury and mental anguish. That doctor that runs that practice has never thought about, like, my nurses are running out there grabbing lunch every week or every day. And that draws attention to my practice and draws lawsuits to my practice. When I have that conversation, I say, A, you can add like an incidental to the job car policy to your company policy, or have like an HR type of policy that says, hey, nurses, we have a petty cash fund, we have whatever, pay for Uber, pay for Shipt, because it is not worth the company, right? Like pay the extra $20 for delivery. That's a better way of avoiding those problems than buying the auto policy to cover nurses running errands.
That's fact. Because
Yeah,
we
but when
in our office we have lunch. We have our admin. She picks up lunch every day for our team.
there you go, yeah.
I don't think we've thought
and,
about that risk.
and she's wearing the 401 Jake mask these days, and
Yeah, it's
so
true.
so yeah. So what I would say is when I give that advice to medical offices, it's really the best decision for them is to set up the Uber account and just tell their nurses, hey, don't worry about it. Don't leave the office. Clock in, clock out. Once in the morning, once in the afternoon, nothing in between. I just lost a pretty easy auto policy, right? Because once I've painted that picture, the physician's like, okay, yeah, we need that. Nurses are all over the place right now. Let's add the coverage. And I get paid on that. For me to say, don't add the coverage, set up an account that all the nurses can draw from, I don't get paid for that. But I think it's the right way to manage that risk, right? So like we're constantly in this kind of conflict also of, sure would be nice that I've saved you a problem that you didn't even realize you had and I could be paid. but you know, like,
but you didn't
yeah,
sell a product. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, that's fascinating. I think that gets a lot of people thinking about their own risks, but it also tees up.
Yeah.
There's so many ways you can introduce this and not do it in a negative way, but in a valuable way to your clients. And I think that's where the key is, helping them make sure that whoever's doing their insurance is thinking through all the risks involved, because the last thing you want is a company to have a huge problem that can basically make them drop their match, close their plan. Like, I mean, just really
Right.
reduce benefits, which would overall, I
Right.
think, impact the long-term health of the company. The culture would hurt. The potential for people to have money to retire so that you can have people leave on time would hurt. So the ramifications of having good risk, monitoring your risk and managing that well is night and day as far as what the future could hold for that company.
Right. And I think to tie it back to 401k, I think you can tell somebody who's new to the 401k business, if they pitch you a projection that's like, oh, we're just going to use an average of a 7% annual return. You having been in the business long enough, you know that in the long term, it might be 7%, 8% average over 20 years, but you have years of 25% up and 2% and 1% down or whatever, right? So like the year that you have that 25% up, if that happens in year 1 versus that happens in year 19, that's a huge difference in how the number looks on year 20, right? Like you want to have your big gain early on so it compounds and whatever. I think that's the same thing with our side, in that nobody's out there thinking like, what if I get sued for a parking lot bumper scrape? Especially this year, I just got off a phone earlier before our call. We were talking about, right, like doctors this year are all dealing with kind of revenue losses, and not just doctors, but across the board, every business is dealing with revenue losses. Everybody's focused upon, it's November. How do we plan for 2021, right? If we had to lay people off, how do we get them back? If we lost revenue, what's like a different revenue stream we can have? The one thing that's going to derail all of that is to get a medical malpractice suit, is to get served with an employment discrimination lawsuit, is to get served with a patient slip and fall. So nobody thinks about P&C because they think like bad things only happen to other people. It'll never happen to me. And yet, if that was true, then nobody would buy the insurance because it never happens to you. So I think for this year, this time in November, this is the time to kind of, obviously, like I'm definitely have a bias here. This is a good time to review P&C coverages, because whatever you have planned for 2021, one good lawsuit will derail kind of the mental mind share and bandwidth you have, right, to focus on recovery when somebody you laid off 2 months ago is serving you with paperwork today. Everything else gets derailed.
Right. Yeah. And I've had clients like that where we had to wait for a lawsuit to be settled before they would implement a match on the plan. So the plan was like set up, and it was like nobody wanted to do it because there was no match, and they didn't have the money because they're paying all these legal fees to fight it, and ended up getting through it all, and it's looking good. But you never know. And that's the part that I want to leave. Like, if you're an advisor listening to this, make it part of your questionnaire to go through. I always ask, what payroll do you have? Who's your benefits broker? Right. Now I ask, who's your P&C agent? Because I want to get to know that person. I want to help make sure that they're thinking through things. And then if they are really good and a specialist, I want to know about that. And that way you can be more holistic and more part of the strategy of the business, not just a salesperson for the 401k, which is what we have to get to. And the flip side, the wholesalers on here listening, maybe partner up with some P&C agents and things to bring more value to the advisors, not just stick around with TPAs all the time, because this is another avenue that would be valuable to those that are selling your products, is to introduce them to someone like James, who really knows the stuff for the industry of the different advisors that you meet with. Because coming in just telling us about your wellness or whatever program you're coming out with now is not valuable, but this is really value that could help one of your clients.
And the P&C part, most people think about, when they think about insurance, they think about the property side, right? Like earthquake, wildfire, hurricane. in a post-COVID, or I mean, we're still in COVID,
Yeah.
when people are having financial troubles, those signs, and again, like some of my best friends are attorneys. I'm not trying to disparage the legal profession, but everybody sees those signs out on, right? Like you can't watch TV without a commercial about like, were you laid off from your job? Were you, right? Like
Yeah.
those suits, when there's economic distress across the board, those suits go up. And I don't think enough people think about the cost of lawsuit risk versus, oh, I live in Louisiana, hurricane risk, employment. I mean, so I used to be in New Orleans. Workers' comp claims cost so much more on an average year than a hurricane claim costs, right? That's just so much money going out for workers' comp compared to money that goes to pay for roof repairs. And people don't think of kind of that legal liability risk. They think about their house and their roof and their car, when behind the scenes, it's the legal stuff that ends up costing more and drags on. But you know what your roof is going to cost to fix. It's the matter, do you want to pay to fix it? You
Right.
don't know how long this workers' comp suit's going to drag on, how long this medical malpractice suit will drag on. And when you have that hanging over you, like you said, you can't make plans until that's resolved. So,
Yeah, it delays everything else where you're trying to build your business, and
right,
this is really critical because the 401k is just one piece of it, right? And if something else happens, it's going to delay that, which
right,
just means you're going to have to spend more time waiting and
right,
possibly having lose the opportunity if they start to shop around later. I mean, it leads to like delays and costs
right,
that could be avoided if you introduce the right person that is thinking more on
right.
their side.
And
So
these are, and we talked about this before, most like policies, like people don't even know what their policies cover. So lawsuits, right? If you have $1 million lawsuit for employment law practice, and then you know that, okay, I got served a notice, but it will for sure settle for less than $1 million, then you can make plans. You can say whatever happens with that suit, whether it's next month or 6 months or a year from now, my insurance is going to cover that whole thing. So other than the deductible that I have to pay at the beginning, I can still make plans with, right? Like once that
yeah, you can
problem
budget
is
for
kind
it.
of boxed off. But
Yeah.
if people find out after the fact that like, oh, I thought I had coverage for employment discrimination, but apparently I don't. And now I have to set aside $1 million just in case. And yeah, so yeah, I mean, that's kind of the PNC conversation. It's supposed to be a planning tool of, you can limit how much you're at risk, not in like the usual risk sense, but right, like even just setting money aside,
Almost
knowing
in a
that that's,
like a high deductible health plan is
yeah,
a good comparison where you have you're at max out of pocket. So if you get enough of that total number
yeah,
in your
you're good,
HSA, you literally don't have any risk because you've got it all covered.
right.
But
And,
there could
and
be outliers that aren't included, so you have to kind of make sure you read the
right,
policy, which is rare. I don't think people read their policies.
exactly,
We do it all the time for our clients. On the personal side, we'll dig into like disability. I mean, all that stuff. We'll read it for them because they don't see enough of them, and that's kind of what we do as holistic advisors. But
right.
um, yeah,
So
knowing
yeah,
what
I
else
mean,
is covered is good.
yeah, like in the best way, using it to kind of segregate those risks. But people, again, nothing against how people make their decisions, but people look at the premium and this one's lower than that one, and they go with the lower one and off they go, and they move on
Thinking
to something else.
it's
And
called
then they end
central
up
hope. Yeah,
having a lawsuit that, like you said, keeps them from planning for anything else in their lives. So,
yeah. No, that's good. Tell me, okay, look, one last final question, then we're gonna wrap things up.
yep.
What if you were to go back, like coming in, you're in law school, like what would you tell yourself that you wish you'd known now, like as far as anything like career related? Um, yeah, what advice would you give yourself knowing what you know now?
I I probably would have focused more on law school actually. So like my job is difficult because like it's a whole mindset. Like
Mhm.
people don't probably don't think of me the way that I would like to be perceived, just like they don't think of financial advisors the way, right? Like the best financial advisors are very different than what people think when they get another cold call about, hey, I'm with so and so, I'm a financial planner, do you want to have a conversation? I think there's that difference.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, looking back, maybe it would have been better to just be like your typical run-of-the-mill lawyer because people know what to expect. But I think there is more benefit to what I'm doing because this is kind of an overlooked area.
Yeah.
But man, sometimes it's hard to tell people that they've overlooked something for 10 years and you're the guy that can solve it, right? So
Yeah. There's kind
yeah.
of a stigma around
Yeah. Oh,
what
yeah.
you
There's a little
do
bit. Yeah.
that you're going to sell them something. So yeah, that makes
Right.
sense.
Whereas
But
like
I
you
think,
expect your lawyer to sell you something and yeah.
yeah, whereas your lawyer, like, okay, you don't even really question. Oh, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
You know
This
what I
is your
mean?
bill.
Most
Yeah.
people, your CPA and your attorney are just like, you
That's the thing
do
you
what
have
they
to pay.
say.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't, you don't question
Exactly.
it very much. And
Right.
that's common. But your insurance and your friend advisor, you're kind of like, who's really winning here? Even though
Right.
you find someone like you that really cares and is going to tell them the best thing. Yeah, it's a big barrier
People
to
are waiting, right, for like, where's the catch? Where's the catch? And sometimes
yeah.
it's like, no, the catch
Yeah.
is I'm losing money by telling you how to avoid insurance. But like, I mean, that's the whole nurse thing is like, there's no catch. I think you should set up an account and not buy auto insurance, but they're still
Yeah.
waiting for the catch. And yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good advice. Good advice.
Yeah.
All right, James. Well, make sure everybody go follow James. Go connect with him on LinkedIn. He puts out good content. And if you seriously have any PNC questions, he is one I would highly recommend you talk to
Yeah.
because he knows this stuff and he'll not only just like tell you maybe a quick answer, like he'll get you the detailed answer you need. And he'll do that without even worrying that he's going to sell something is what I found with James. He's awesome that way. So appreciate you taking the time to James. Any parting thoughts for the group, for the listeners?
Read the full policy, get the full policy, not just the first page. Yeah.
Read your policies. I know it's
Or
boring.
yeah.
Do it in the morning after you've woke up and
Yes.
you're not about to go to bed. Read them.
Exactly.
Know how to understand them. And yeah, don't think that you're out of the woods just because you bought something and everything's covered. So that's
exactly.
Cool.
Right.
All right. Thanks,
All
James.
right. Well, thanks.
Appreciate
Thank you. Right. Thanks. Take care.